Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the workshop, which will be presenting an overview of the community and economic development programs and upcoming initiatives. I'll just turn it right over to Carrie to get things going, and so we have enough time for questions and discussion. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thank you, Chair Ortega and commissioners. I think at this time we'll share our screen and get the PowerPoint loaded. So I think in terms of the purpose of the workshop today, we just wanted to talk, if we'll advance to the next slide here. We are in the final formation of our kind of CED programmatic areas. Many of which will be funded through the HRA levy. And this has been of particular interest to our communities. So we wanted to ensure an early 2022 stop before the board to get your feedback and reaction before we turn these kind of programmatic areas into cut sheets and start building out the solicitation for proposals. So we're going to give you the overview in terms of programmatic areas, in terms of HRA levy specifically, but how they also intersect with our other existing funding sources. We are going to look at the schedule and the timeline associated with those programs. We'll touch on other initiatives, time permitting, and then open it up for board questions and discussion. Next slide. This is a little bit team heavy here, but we are a growing team and we wanted to make sure that you saw CEDs growing up. We're growing up. We are becoming an official department. We see ourselves through the lens of 3 unofficial divisions: housing, redevelopment, and business support. And so there you'll see the kind of building out of our housing development division. And then also you'll see the inclusion of our brand new planning specialist, Peiyu Pua, and she joined us January 3rd of this year. She has great background in terms of research support. She's done work through MnDOT, CURA. She has a dual degree from the University of Minnesota in planning and public health. So she's got a lot of great intersections, and Commissioner Maniscalco, for your benefit as well, has a lot of excitement and expertise in climate change and green infrastructure. So we're very, very pleased to have her on our team, and we'll continue to build it out in alignment with the goals of the ECI plan and of course the vision mission goals of the county. Next slide. So these are the kind of departmental programmatic areas, and you'll see housing infrastructure, redevelopment, business support, growth, and innovation. But I really want to make it clear, and I really want to stress that our priority area at this time and into the unforeseeable future is developing housing infrastructure along the housing continuum. And so although you'll see these areas parsed out, you know, we're really looking at all roads leading to housing infrastructure in terms of both rental supply and building wealth. So you'll see that in terms of our goals around single family rehab. You'll even see that on the business support and growth side when we look at growing developers. So it's both an opportunity to build a pipeline for those that are developing affordable housing, and it's intended to support development as an industry, as a business as well. So we'll touch on these kind of programmatic areas, but I really wanted to stress that we're putting that all into the bucket in alignment with our vision plan and with a lot of feedback we received from community partners. Next slide. All right, so here we'll get into some of the funding sources and how they intersect with other funding sources such as ARPA, CDBG, et cetera. Next slide. So I really want to emphasize the kind of 4 programmatic areas and try to de-emphasize the anticipated amount. We wanted to associate a figure to each area for purposes of division planning and staff associated with each area. However, of course, the projects that come in under these 4 specific areas are really going to guide that amount. So if we are oversubscribed in terms of proposals for housing infrastructure and undersubscribed for redevelopment, some of those are going to shift. And I also want to really emphasize yet again, whether it be Environmental Response Fund or our Critical Corridor /TOD program What we're trying to do is strengthen critical corridors for strong, stable housing. We're trying to ensure that contaminated land is cleaned up to support housing development. So again, they all work kind of within intersections of one another. But this is to show specifically how the HRA levy will kind of shake out, but will also be coupled with these other funding sources and be leveraged with these other funding sources to go even further. Next slide. This is generally specific to the HRA levy spending area. And again, housing is the priority, but right now you'll see the 10% of administrative expenses in that wheel as well. So you'll recall our commitment to this board and to our city partners that we would ensure that as much of the levy returns to the community. And so we have set aside a threshold of about 10% or lower of administrative expenses on the levy. And so that of course includes HRA levy staff, that includes IS charges, other expenses associated with a new funding source. But that's the extent of it. And so we've stressed this with finance and they're well aware of that. And so that we'll see about 90% return to the community. Next slide. Again, I just really want to stress the amount of engagement we've had with city partners in the last 6 months. So as we go through each kind of programmatic section and slide, you will see how they directly align with the strategies and recommended actions of the ECI plan. However, we also led monthly economic development summits with our city partners at the end of 2021. We had 5 economic development summits around these various programmatic areas to ensure we were not being redundant or creating programs that our city partners would not benefit from. One aspect of the HRA levy that I want to kind of remind the board is that statutorily, we are required to receive a resolution of support to be able to use levy funds for a project in the underlying jurisdiction. And so that is pretty comparable to that of our CDBG and home program, but that was very helpful in terms of assuring the local communities that the county wasn't just going to build housing without municipal consent. They are required to be a partner in this and lend their support. We hosted one-on-ones. We held what we called CED office hours with our communities, and we were very pleased to see that almost every single community in Ramsey County took us up on those one-on-one meetings. They were very eager to talk about priority areas of their community with our team and talk about projects in the pipeline. So it's a very exciting opportunity to get to the more kind of granular level detail in terms of what's happening in the next year or two that we can partner on. And then lastly, at the end of this year, we sent the city partners a survey that drafted out these programmatic areas you're about to receive and allowed them the opportunity to provide feedback to ensure that there wasn't something that was grossly in misalignment with their community goals, and to ensure an opportunity for them to be co-creators in these programmatic areas. Next slide. All right, at this point, I'll send it over to Housing Development Manager, Max Holthusen.
Thank you, Director Collins. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. So as we dive into the housing infrastructure programmatic area, we've split this into 3 work areas: multifamily affordable housing, wealth generation, and community stabilization and wealth preservation. So those are our 3 areas. On the left, you'll see how it connects to the economic competitiveness and inclusion plan. So strategies from the ECI plan there on the left. And then up on the top, you can see what other funding sources are also going to kind of go into this work area, as well as what are our 2022 priorities. So in the multifamily affordable housing area, really on that preservation of existing affordable housing, and by preservation, we define that as the rehab of an existing building or the continuation or establishment of affordability terms on those units in that existing building. So usually that's paired with a rehab, but it, in theory, might not necessarily be paired with a rehab project. 2, the second priority is really that deepening of affordability levels in new construction projects. That could also happen. That could also happen in a preservation project as well. So we see projects coming in at the 60% area median income or 50% area median income, and how can we use our county's investments to deepen that affordability down to 30% AMI. So we've seen that through our kind of first round of ARPA investments as well. So we hope to continue that in 2022 and our solicitation. Speaking of our upcoming solicitation, I'm going to hand it over to Jewel Atanga, who is kind of helping us lead that work. He's a community development specialist on the housing team here.
Thank you, Max. Chair Ortega, commissioners. I'm Jules Atana, one of the community development specialists in the housing division of CED. My focus is on multifamily development financing and policy. The 2022 Affordable Housing Solicitation will have various funding sources, including ARPA, HOME, CDBG, ERF, general obligation bonds, as well as HRA levy fund. The key priorities for this solicitation are the preservation of affordable housing units, including the production of units for extremely low-income households. One way to produce this level of affordability is also to invest on naturally occurring affordable housing projects, along with the construction of new units. We'll therefore fund acquisition cost, rehab cost, as well as construction cost. Non-profit and for-profit developers can apply to the solicitation that will be released next week on February 14 until March 14. It should also be noted that we'll continue to fund the NOAA Impact Fund that is managed by Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. Thank you. I will pass it over back to Max, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jewel. Next slide, please. So our next work area is wealth generation. Our community development specialist, Portia Jackson, is kind of our lead here in this wealth generation area, as well as some of our other owner-occupied programs that we'll see in the community stabilization area. But Portia could not join us today. She is at her 19th annual African American Parent Involvement Day at her children's school. So I thought, hey, that's more important. I'll present for you and knock this slide out of the way. So, in 2022, our priority goals are affordable home ownership, and also thinking about how can we partner with nonprofits who are kind of focusing on innovative ownership models to really tackle that racial home ownership gap that we see here in the Twin Cities. So Ramsey County currently has a program that's aimed at, the home ownership gap. It's our down payment assistance program. It's called First Home, and it's funded through HUD Home Funds. Lately, we've seen a huge drop in the usage of this program. So over the last 2 years, because of market conditions, and by market conditions, I'm really talking about escalating prices and higher competition for owner-occupied homes, we've seen a drastic decline in usage there. So it's time to reevaluate the purpose of this program and how we can make it better reflect market conditions, as well as focus on that racial home ownership gap that we see persist in our region and across the country. So as we evaluate this, and so our planning specialists and our community development specialists are working together to evaluate our existing program and come up with recommendations for a future down payment assistance program. We believe we'll recommend shifting from home funding to HRA funding so that we can lift ourselves up out of some of those more stringent HUD requirements, such as the purchase price. In HUD funding, the purchase price is capped at $273. In this market, we see very few houses at that level or below. And we would probably align with the state limit, which is $352. And so thinking about what are some of the pros and cons of that. We'd also are thinking about a shift from first-time home buyer to first-generation home buyer. We've seen this kind of change in some of our partner jurisdictions like Woodbury and St. Louis Park as they establish their down payment assistance. And really that's to kind of kickstart that family's first time in creating generational wealth. Whereas with a more broad first-time home buyer, we see that they may already be benefiting from a previous generation's generational wealth. If all goes well, we would begin this process at the beginning of the HUD fiscal year. So that would be July 1st, 2022. And along with that, we might have to reallocate home funds to another eligible project. And so we would bring that to the HRA if the time comes to do that. Next slide, please. And our third work area is community stabilization and wealth preservation. And at this time, we're not recommending HRA funding for these programs. We are investing heavily with our federal funds into these programs. And we can continue that into the near future and evaluate which ones do we deem to be particularly effective at creating wealth preservation and undoing racial disparities related to home ownership, and may merit additional HRA funding. So we do have our energy efficiency program, as well as our rehab program, which should restart in early 2022, as we now have a provider selected for that program through a competitive solicitation, and continued investment in kind of community infrastructure projects in suburban Ramsey County. We also have just signed agreements for our critical repair programs for single family and manufactured homes. So this will be the first grant program for manufactured homes in the region, and we know that that's a big need for those kind of smaller repairs across our suburban communities. I'm going to hand it over to our other community development specialist, Heather Posthumus, to talk about some of the impact that we've already seen with our COVID-19 HUD funding.
Thank excuse Good afternoon, commissioners. I'm Heather Posthumus.
Excuse me, I have Commissioner Carter's hand is up. Let me see if she's, you want to go ahead, Tony?
Thank you. It was actually on the wealth generation slide. I really appreciate the eligibility conversation around moving from first time to first generation home buyers, and understanding how that helps us to look to communities that have been involved in wealth extraction in the past. I wondered if also, in accordance with the housing infrastructure strategies from the ECI plan, number 2 specifically, if there is an opportunity here to look at neighborhoods that have experienced that historic wealth extraction, such as we can see on our maps in the ECI plan that we have. And I just thought I'd ask that question. Of course, to mind immediately comes the Rondo area and the neighborhood having experienced that kind of historic wholesale wealth extraction, and whether there's opportunity to, in fact, craft program with that kind of specificity is the question.
Chair, Commissioner Carter, as we evaluate the existing first home program, I think geography is one of those areas that we can definitely look into. Currently, with our HUD funding, it is limited to suburban Ramsey County. And if we shift to the HRA, the geography could become available to the entire county. We'd want to make sure, if we do move in that direction, as you talk about, to make sure that we are in alignment with the City of St. Paul's down payment assistance program, and think about which area are they doing well covering and where would we kind of fill in a gap there. So I think geography is an area that we will evaluate.
All right, thank you very much. And I asked that question specifically as we look at the element of historic wealth extraction. I appreciate the opportunity to continue that.
Max, I have a question regarding the generational versus first-time home buyers. So if I understand it right, you're saying if my parents had a house, that wouldn't qualify me?
Yep, that's the transition we've seen some of these other local communities make, moving from, hey, has someone in your family nearby in a nearby generation already owned a home or not? And so if your parents did own a home, you may have benefited more from generational wealth. And so we're perhaps focusing on those families that have not benefited from any generational wealth yet in the homeownership wealth realm.
Yeah, I guess, coming from New York City, that would make more sense. But when I first came here, there were so many low-income people that had a home, owned their own home, no matter how, how small it was. I guess I'm trying to reconcile in my head if that doesn't in some way take out a lot of folks from applying that wouldn't be able to buy their first home.
I'll just jump in, Chair and Commissioners. I think to your point, we want to understand this a little bit more. And so I think we're going to be exploring, what a generational wealth building program looks like and what the limitations are, and then kind of making a programmatic recommendation moving forward. So you'll notice that although we're kind of unveiling all of these programs, that doesn't mean right now that the programs are going to be coming online. We've got some time to kind of piece it all together, but that's a great question, and we're going to take some time to figure that out.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So I'll kick it back to Heather.
All right, thank you. So I'll talk about what's going on currently with our community development block grant COVID related funds. Two of those programs that are up and running are the food resources and the legal aid services. Food resources has 4 different organizations that have had to step up their response to need in the community due to COVID related hardships. And so to date, they have served 1,225 individual households, and 100% of those that have been served are at 80% or less of the area median income. And then for legal services, there's 3 different legal organizations, and these organizations primarily serve, I shouldn't say primarily, they all serve just low income households in suburban Ramsey County. And these families are facing a variety of legal issues, majority of which are housing related due to COVID related hardships as well. And to date, they've been able to serve 91 households, and 100% of those households are at or below 50% of the area median income. And so that brings up the solicitation that will also be opening on February 14th for public services and public facilities and improvement projects. And that will also be open until March 14th.
Yeah, thank you, Heather. I just wanted to pause there and kind of celebrate some of those, the impact we're able to have with these additional federal resources. And just over 2 quarters, so we've only been tracking outcomes since the fall here when we got these programs on agreement, but it just shows the kind of richness of data we're able to get out of our investments, and wanted to highlight that. And so that concludes the housing section. So next slide, please.
Next, there was mortgage assistance as well.
Excuse me, before you begin, Trista.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wondered before you go on, I had 2 quick questions on previous slides as well. On the wealth building opportunity, I know Carrie, you said we're going to flush this out a little bit more, but I wondered also if there's a way that we can assist families that maybe owned a home but lost it in the 2008-2010 foreclosure crash, especially since that hit hardest on our communities of color that were preyed upon by bad mortgages, and thinking if there's opportunity to kind of reset that as well. And then the other question I had is on these solicitations that are open now, there's 2 different ones open until March from the 14th to the 14th. How do we get that information out to people, potential developers, or maybe new people that are thinking about this work? Because that has continued to be a bit of a mystery to community folks. As I'm talking to them, I keep telling them to watch for it, but how do we get that information out?
So I can answer that question first on the down payment assistance evaluation. And we've seen other jurisdictions that are not counting a foreclosure against an applicant. And so that is something we could evaluate as we redevelop our down payment assistance program. So we've seen that in other jurisdictions. On the solicitation, I kind of consider this presentation our first kickoff of that to the board. We've been working with communications for that February 14th launch. So it'll be available on our websites, through our CED newsletter, through our list of developers as well, and through other partner agencies and organizations. So for example, we always do release to Heading Home Ramsey, Rainbow Health, State of Minnesota. So it really spreads through a variety of networks, and we continue to work with communications on that. So you'll be seeing materials for that later this week.
Victoria?
Thank you. That was actually my issue as well, is it's open for a month, but let's face it, if they hear about it for the first time on February 14th, trying to get something together that quickly, unless it's already in the works, is going to be somewhat difficult. I am wondering if, because this is just our first go around on this one, and how many times are we going to be able to offer programs during the year, or do you anticipate that? Is it 2 more times this year, or just 1 more time? And if you could state, kind of, there will be another, there'll be another 2 rounds, or whatever it is. If you could tell people that now, they wouldn't feel like this is their only shot, and then 3 months from now we do another one and they go, oh, well, I wish I would have known that. Do you see what I'm saying? Because when you just hear about it, a month is a long time to be able to, or enough time to be able to get a proposal together, but you really have to start. Unless you're already started, it's probably not going to get from idea to fruition and an application.
And Sharon, commissioners, I can field this one, and I'll just say, we do have upcoming slides that I think will address many of these questions in terms of program schedule and timeline. And we also have a slide dedicated to the solicitation, because we know the significance around this particular solicitation. I do want to stress, however, at this time, technically the board has allocated 20 million for affordable housing supply, because we're waiting on that second allocation in May before we go back to the board and make another request. So there will be subsequent solicitations. This will not be the only kick at the can, if you will. However, we also don't know the extent of projects that we're going to get with this upcoming solicitation. We're hoping that we get a really good, healthy amount, a wide spectrum of both supply and preservation proposals. We don't know if we're going to be wildly oversubscribed, undersubscribed, or if it's just going to hit 20 million perfectly. But it's going to be a good litmus test to see how many subsequent solicitations we do. I see this pretty comparable to that of the small business relief grants. And each round we adjusted the kind of guardrails, if you will, to kind of try to right size the amount of applications received. And so I anticipate this will be comparable. But we do have a great slide here talking about schedule and timeline that I think will answer some questions as well.
Thank you. And again, my question is more about making sure that the people that might be interested are aware of the timeline. So in this case, for example, if we are undersubscribed, there may be one before that, so that there may be one before we go out for the second 7 million, correct?
Yep, I'll look to Max, because I don't want to give him a heart attack, but I.
Well, and I don't know that we will be.
Right.
It's important that the communication, that's really what it's about, is the communication. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, sorry, I'm like in
Okay.
a gallery and I can't see people's faces. There we are.
No, that's
Michelle.
okay. I just, my headset just said that I wasn't connected anymore. So I don't know what I'm not connected to, but I guess it didn't matter. Thank you.
Yep. Some additional thoughts on top of Director Collins's initial statements there. With each solicitation, we kind of build a movement. So we saw we had our November 2020 solicitation, and we received 8 applications, but talked to so many developers and potential developers about their projects during that time. And then our team has been meeting with developers and potential developers about 2 to 3 a week since the fall. So through our existing relationships and through our networks of partnerships, I do feel like we already have a very good base of from our cities, our developers, and our nonprofits about who's aware of this. And the communications is really kind of to go above and beyond that to really spread the word for those that we haven't met with yet too. We can talk about this more on the solicitation side, but this February solicitation is so important because it gears people up for that state consolidated RFP, which includes all of the state funding, and which initial applications are due in the spring. So this really lets developers figure out their their financial readiness going into that application. I think in the future, another time that might make a lot of sense for an additional solicitation, perhaps with those additional ARPA dollars, would be in the fall of 2022, after we start to learn who received funding and who did not from the state consolidated RFP. So there's these other kind of time periods that we can loop into and really leverage our investments as we think about when and how we plan out our future solicitations.
All right, moving on. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Martha Faust, Redevelopment Manager here, and I'm going to walk you through some additional tools that we have for facilitating redevelopment in Ramsey County. These are organized in 3 areas: critical corridors, environmental investigation and remediation, and site preparation and infrastructure. And as you are all well aware, Ramsey County is the most densely developed county in the state. Therefore, all development is redevelopment. It offers communities the opportunity to be able to reposition the limited land that they have to meet evolving needs over time. You can see here how the alignment with the strategies from the Economic Inclusion Plan and priorities listed at the top. You can think of these programs as a complement to the housing programs that were just described. And as Director Collins noted earlier, just wanted to emphasize that supporting inclusive housing is a priority across this program area, along with job creation and other county goals. Also, these programs are still being built, so they will be coming online later in 2022. So in this area of critical corridors, first we have a corridor pre-development planning program that will help communities with activities such as land use and zoning studies, market and feasibility analysis. And really it's patterned after the popular 2019 pilot program that funded redevelopment planning initiatives throughout the county. So that's on the planning side. And then a larger amount of funds will go to an accompanying critical corridors development program. And that is intended to support physical infrastructure and real estate development. Similar to the 2019 pilot, we are currently identifying potential corridors throughout the county. These are transportation and transit corridors, major commercial corridors, and we will be seeking feedback from our city partners to ensure that we are aligning with their priorities. You can see in terms of timing that these programs are being built now, as I said, and we have our targeting applications being accepted in September. And additionally, in terms of that question that came up earlier about timing and frequency of solicitation, for the moment, we are anticipating that all of the redevelopment programs will be a once-a-year solicitation, but we will continue to consult with our community partners to understand demand and optimal timing, and we'll be prepared to take a flexible approach. So that's critical corridors. We can move on to the next slide, which is regarding environmental investigation and remediation. So as you know, historically, our environmental response fund has been oversubscribed, as is the case with all of the brownfield grant programs in the Metro. Virtually any site redevelopment involves some aspect of brownfield presence. Historically, our has been limited to soil and groundwater cleanups. And what we're calling IRF Plus is going to support additional typical redevelopment activities, more on the assessment and remediation prep side of projects, as well as vapor mitigation, which is becoming standard practice in nearly all redevelopment projects. And just one note on the in the priorities, you're seeing improving project feasibility and readiness. And then the second priority is about supporting projects in environmental justice areas of concern. These are defined by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency as areas that either meet poverty characteristics, have a high percentage of English language learners, and or are in tribal areas. And they are found pretty broadly, not just in the city of St. Paul, but in suburban Ramsey County as well. And then for this program, we are targeting early third quarter for funding. And so this program is being built and will be a good complement to IRF. And then we can go on to the next slide, site preparation and infrastructure. So last but not least, this is super important, as I noted earlier. Really, all of our development is redevelopment. And so, being able to offset the costs of transitioning buildings and properties to new users is really important. And the eligible activities and uses here are things that we don't currently fund and that are important in terms of site redevelopment. I wanted to note on the building demolition and deconstruction item that there we're working closely with environmental health to ensure that any building demo or deconstruction will be coordinated with their goals for waste diversion and reuse. So that's really important to ensure that we're optimizing that across the goals within the county. And that is what all I've got in this area. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, we'll next go to Rick Howden.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. I will talk about a couple of programs that we have planned in our business support and growth area. These programs are designed to tackle strategies 6, 7, and 8 from our economic inclusion and vision plan. Priorities for our entrepreneur support programs include accelerating BIPOC business growth, expanding entrepreneurship pathways, and supporting business advisors. And so one of the programs that we'd like to pursue is a BIPOC Developer Technical Assistance Program. This program would be designed and very similar to Twin Cities LISC's Developers of Color program. One of our projects that we were able to put some environmental relief fund into, 520 Payne, done by Johnny Opara and JO Companies, was an individual who participated in LISC's program. And so trying to find ways to continue to grow our developers, especially in the housing field, because we know that we have a demand to build housing and we're going to need more entities to take on those projects. And so this program will really help guide them along for folks who, I had the privilege of meeting Johnny back when I was working with the city of St. Paul, and I'm so glad that he stuck with it, because it is challenging, and I really feel strongly that that program, and he has testified to the skills and connections that were made through that program that helped bring that project to fruition. So something that we want to put some money into and help support and continue that going forward. Our next program that we have in the works here, again, similar to the redevelopment programs, these programs are kind of slated for later this year once the HRA levy funds come into the county. So for small business growth, supporting business planning and improving business lending and business ownerships, we'd like to create a local investment opportunity fund pilot This program would really help leverage some dollars that come through the state. This DEED, the Department of Employment and Economic Development, received funds from the U.S. Treasury in what is called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And one of the governor's proposals at the legislature this year allows for these dollars to be utilized to take in interest and ownership interest in properties. And the way that this has been done in other communities around the country with the State Small Business Credit Initiative funds is that their exit plan for the state or local government to get out of that is to turn the ownership of the property over to employee ownership or a cooperative model, but this helps put some investment in. It's somewhat comparable to, you might have heard of some of the projects going on across the river in Hennepin County with Twin Cities LISC Community Asset Transition Fund. So a number of organizations put some funds together, and then we're able to purchase properties and are now redeveloping some. I know there's a project on Lake Street that was damaged, and the civil unrest that the Neighborhood Development Center has acquired through a use of these funds as well. So we'd like to establish something similar to that and be able to not only address some of the ownership issues, but again, address some of the wealth creation as well. Last slide here is on a couple of marketing and attraction pieces, some enhancements that we're planning to make with our Ramsey County Means Business. As you may remember in the before times, as I like to say, our website when we launched it was meant to be a great landing page with an incentive dashboard that had potential sites matched up with incentives from the city, county, state, and federal government. We want to put some more investment in that and get that back. As you know, we transitioned to our COVID business recovery information and lost a lot of that, or didn't lose, but that data has become outdated. So we want to improve that and get that up to date and connected with commercial property listings, in which be easier to manage and more up to date. And we also want to focus on some niche markets and business sector support. So a couple of examples that have gone on, the City of Brooklyn Center has done a Black-owned business kind of feature. And so that's something that we'd like to model to help lift up some of the businesses in our communities. So with that, I'll pause for any questions or be around in the background. So thank you very much.
All right. Next slide, please, unless there's questions.
Yes, sir. If I may.
Trista?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Rick. I just have a couple of quick questions. Of course, it's always exciting to hear about what Donnie Opara is up to as a Ramsey County kid who's doing really great things developing our community. How do other developers of color get in touch with similar programs? Do they contact you? There's a couple other local developers that are working on some projects on Rice Street, Mo Hong Lee, who is looking at some things. So how do they do that?
Yeah, at this point, the program really isn't developed quite yet, or the funding mechanisms and the infrastructure hasn't really been in place. But I think there are, at this point, kind of a quick answer to that question is there are a few folks out there, people like Johnny or Ku Veng with JB Vang, who have been very supportive of other developers. Obviously, there's a business nature to a number of these folks, so there's always a natural tendency. But once we get this built up, and like I said, trying to use that model that LISC had, so that we're not just creating something from scratch, but really having a roadblock, getting individuals and other experts involved and committed to the program as well, to get through some of those barriers. So when we get further along into the development, we'll definitely communicate that out to the commissioners and have you be able to reach out and send that out to other folks. In the meantime, I'm happy to have any conversations with folks who, if I could make connections or put them in touch with anybody, definitely feel free to send them my way or to Director Collins's way as well.
And I'll just add too that this was really the continuation of St. Paul's Developers of Color Capacity Building program that they did with LISC. And after the completion of the program, I know that there were individuals that were kind of new to the affordable housing development community saying, okay, I've got land, I've got a performa, can you sit down with me and do some project counseling? And I know our housing team have fielded quite a bit of those calls, and we're really eager to see again what results as part of the solicitation, so that we can get a range of developers in terms of background and experience. But the reality of the situation is that those developers that went through that program have become tremendous mentors for individuals who own land and really want to produce the land in a way that benefits the community. So we just want to continue that momentum and build out supports around that.
And then I just had one follow-up question as well on the Small Business Growth Local Investment Opportunity Fund pilot. So we have a couple, others probably are aware more, but I know in the North End and Haviland Midway, those neighborhood groups have actually formed their own cooperatives to purchase land to keep in the neighborhood that is both in business investments as well as in housing for affordable housing. And they're just getting started, right? They're just forming their cooperatives. Is that the type of thing you're talking about in this pilot funding, where it's local neighbors investing in their own neighborhood?
Yeah, exactly what we're trying to do here to help support that, so that we can come to the table with some funds, potentially leverage those SSBCI funds from deed to get into the projects with that exit plan of being, okay, now it's formed into a co-op, they've become stabilized, they've been able to, then they can pay off the debt or, whatever with the term. So no, that's exactly, developing this program in a way to do more projects exactly that way. So.
Thank you.
Tony?
Actually, I just took my hand down. I wanted to compliment, however, that particular area that Commissioner Matis Castillo just asked a question about. What a wonderful way to have this innovation assist to keep wealth in our communities and to help people who have not had the opportunity to envision owning a business to do so, whether that be local folks or, employees. It is just a wonderful area of innovation for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Jo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I could say this at any time, but I just want to congratulate and thank this team, Director Collins, and all of your amazing people. I know I met Rick Howden at an event, several events out in my area. New Brighton is really, all of my communities are appreciating the partnerships with you and this and all of the work that you're doing. I know I was at a grand opening of an IRF building or that used environmental response funds, and then the next one I was at was a Native American business that was going into New Brighton. And so it's just great to see that work being done. And I just want to say thanks, and thanks for inviting me. I mean, I hope that you invite all the commissioners to the events when they come up, because it's so important for us to see that great work, and the community just loves it. And I know I get notices from the business councils in my areas as well, because they also appreciate all this work. So just thank you so much for all that. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, next slide. All right, I think, lastly, this has come up quite a bit throughout, the spirit of innovation, and we are in transformative times. And so we do hope to parse out some of the funds to be able to do just that, to innovate and to really lean on the intersections between what may be CED and environmental health, or CED and workforce solutions, or housing stability, to ensure that there are kind of seed funding for really innovative concepts. So I think we all probably have participated in the last few years on a variety of calls where you've got an excellent entity before you, an excellent proposal, but there's no mechanism to point them to. There's no mechanism or funding source to direct them toward. And nor do they fit into one neat box. And so this is really intended to target innovative proposals, whether it be around climate resiliency or green infrastructure, innovative housing and business models, shared equity models, place-making initiatives, or intersections with workforce development. We want to ensure flexible funding that can support some of these really unique projects. So that is the number one, I think, piece of feedback that we heard from our city partners was, please make flexible programs. Don't give us 20 different programs. Just create flexible funding sources that we may, should a project arrive, third quarter of the year, we don't want to tell a developer or a business, you have to wait a year to apply. We want to make sure that there's ways to target funding throughout the year. And so that's what we're really trying to do. And that's what you'll see with our rollout of programs momentarily. Next slide. All right, now you'll recall 3 years ago, you saw this slide. And this was really, really, really entertaining for us to do. You'll recall that we had our peer county comparison. And if you look at the bottom, there was a levy question mark. And we did not have that checked. And we're the only county that did not have that checked. We do now. And as a result, you'll see the red check marks building out our programming so that we are able to economically compete better as a region. And so I just wanted to take the moment to circle back in terms of the spreadsheet and to say, wow, look at what we're doing as a region to really position ourselves in terms of housing infrastructure and economic growth. So we won't dwell on that any longer. Next slide. All right, Josh, take it away.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you, commissioners. I want to just, I think we kind of started to roll out this answer to the question earlier around what's on the horizon, what's next. And I know there is going to be a slide upcoming here that kind of goes into greater detail on the housing solicitation that is planned to roll out yet in just this month. But I do want to just kind of give a very brief and quick overview of where all these things lay out, both within our programmatic areas. See, you'll see those common colors that you've seen in prior slides, but also just how we are organizing ourselves as we grow our team and how we kind of dig into the specifics of the work. I think we're pretty excited that folks are starting to get ready for when these programs go live. And we do have a fair amount of work ahead of us, but I do wanted to just kind of call out that. The one last thing I wanted to just kind of piggyback on what Carrie just mentioned, which is, we are continuing to explore and looking for those innovative models. We know that solicitations, both from our own experience in CED in the past, or from our other partners' experience, they tend to get exactly what they're asking for. And so what we're trying to do is provide space and opportunity for those innovative ideas to come in. And so one of those things that we are continuing to explore and figure out if this is the right model is looking at requests for information or requests for interest, specifically in that area of shared equity and wealth, as a way to facilitate new and exciting models, new exciting pilots, new exciting ways that can drive new approaches that find our way into I'll say more of the stable funding and other programmatic areas that we've previously laid out. I think the next slide, I'll turn this back over to Max.
Just really wanting to hammer home some of these key dates with the 2022 housing solicitation and emphasizing some of that flexibility that we're building in for applicants. So 2 solicitations will open on February 14th. One is our inclusive housing development solicitation that Jewel laid out earlier in the presentation. Again, that's going to be a one-door application for all developers, nonprofit and private developers to apply for money for their projects. They won't be applying to a specific funding source. The staff will kind of bring in the sources, evaluate them and underwrite them, and then figure out which source matches the project the best. Again, that's for multifamily and single family construction, preservation, and acquisition. So all things housing. The second one is really our CDBG solicitation. So this is for public services, public infrastructure, and public facilities. So those kind of other eligible CDBG activities. And again, this is very similar to what has happened over the past couple of decades here on that side. We do have a new funding source where 5% of it can be used for services, and that's home ARP. So you've seen that both on the community stabilization side as well as on the housing development side. And so again, besides some of those partnership meetings that we've been having for months with potential developers and building out the communications materials with our communications department, we'll be releasing all of that information on our website through our partner organizations this week. And we'll be holding an informational meeting that we'll really be driving folks who are interested in applying to on February 16th, just after the application opens. So that'll be the first time we kind of hold one of those solicitation meetings for a housing related solicitation. So more to come there. And next slide.
Max, and thank you, Max. Just coming back to me and commissioners, I'll just kind of speak to how CED plans to further operationalize these programs that we just introduced and how they kind of begin to fit together. And I think this was talked about a little bit in each of our sections, but I just want to put a finer point on those. So a good example, and I want to call out my prior colleagues, Denise and Mary Lou, for really kind of starting this. And that is, for years, CED engaged in this resource layering of projects. I know certainly in the past, we had far less resources and really were regularly hamstrung by our ability because of funding limitations. But we're really kind of looking forward to building upon that prior work to assist in bringing vital and transformative and really those creative projects towards implementation. So on the left-hand side of your screen is really just an example of a hypothetical project. It's actually not that crazy to think that all these things show up on a project, because we do actually see this with some regularity, maybe not exactly these bullets, but we do see this. And so, no project is simple or the same, but our approach is to begin to match the best funding resource to the project. In many instances, we plan to move the time-sensitive funding like ARPA or like HOME first, while layering in the flexibility of these other funding streams, in particular the HRA levy. As you heard from Max, that common door or coordinated solicitation will make it easier for prospective developers to really kind of assist us in doing that matching. So I want to lastly say that this layering is envisioned over time as well. So even when we don't yet have a project, so as you saw a little bit with Martha in those pre-development planning programs, that we can start to build that over time, build in the innovation, build in kind of those in those early cases, early planning and piloted innovation to target, let's say, support Johnny Opara and other developers who are eager to get into the game of seeding deeply affordable community-centered projects. So, this plays out, and I want to just, leave you with, while that layering certainly will occur on a project-by-project basis, we're going to begin to look at that over the life of, corridors and areas so that we can see how, small investments create catalytic investments moving forward. Just as we are looking to layer resources, and that obviously is very, very important, establishing ways to demonstrate accountability and transparency in those revenues is also equally important. And, if we go back to the ECI plan, it very clearly laid out a game plan for us in CED. One particular way that we want to demonstrate that we are living up to that plan is through the creation of an ECI plan tracker. And I know Carrie will give you the kind of the link here in a minute. And there is that little slight image on the side of your screen here. But this is, we hope that will continue to inform you all, our partners and the public, on how and what CED is up to when it comes to implementing the goals and objectives of that ECI plan. We also know that the source of the funds is also very important, and this is something that we're taking very seriously, and working, internally and with our partners to develop those additional tracking tools or dashboards, if you want to use that word, to highlight the impact of these particular funding streams. There are some things that are required, certainly through program funds like ARPA, but I think we know, and we've heard that, Carrie in particular has heard this loud and clear from some of our city partners, is they want to know where some of the investments and the funding is going as it pertains to HRA levy funding. And then Carrie, I know kickstarted this right at the beginning of the meeting, highlighting one of our new employees, but earlier this month we hired Peyupua, who will really strengthen our reporting and analysis of our programs individually and across the programmatic areas of housing, redevelopment, and business. So we're pretty excited about that. I'm certainly very, very excited about that piece. But lastly, now that we have an ECI plan to direct and guide us, we're eager to kind of jump back into our department performance measures to ensure that we have alignment in there. You may recall, it's been a while since maybe you pulled that narrative out, but we really did point to, once the ECI plan is kind of established and up and running, we will come back to ensure that those are the right measures. So all that is to say that we're thinking about these all together. We used a pyramid. I'm not sure exactly if that's like the perfect example of, the perfect diagram, but we know that at the top of our list is the ECI plan and how that directs us in each individual way. And we're pretty excited to roll out this year, towards the end of the year, obviously, begin to establish an annual report that highlights and celebrates the tremendous work and action that comes from this department, and the shared work that we have with other departments and partners. So we're pretty excited to do that, and bring in a lot of our friends and such to kind of celebrate on all this work on multiple programmatic areas, on multiple funding streams, in so many different ways. So I think, Carrie?
Yeah, and I'll just say that after this, I'll send out a link to the ECI tracker, but you can find it at ramseycounty.us/economic inclusion. There's a track the plan. That's really intended to show the range of investment that's going toward the recommended actions within the ECI plan. And so I'll send out the link at the conclusion of this workshop, but want to thank communications for their help in terms of establishing. I know maybe we have some dial fatigue right now, but I think it really demonstrates across the various recommended action where we've plugged in a lot of energy investment and where we may need to do some work. So in terms of other areas of research and collaboration, I'll go through these quickly so we can leave ample time for questions and discussion. I'll start with the surface parking analysis. We have a tremendous intern, Jennifer Adade, who has been working with Martha in terms of really mapping out where there's surface parking. You'll recall through the Urban 3 analyses, the extent to which Ramsey County has just a surplus of surface parking, which represents redevelopment areas for housing and employment. So we've begun to map that out so that we can have very strategic conversations about redevelopment opportunities with our city partners. We also have begun conversations with property tax and Heather Bessler, where Heather previously worked in Olmsted County. There was a pretty robust HRA-led TFL program where they acquired and rehabbed housing for affordable housing. So we're starting to have conversations about what that may look like for the Ramsey County HRA. Fellowships and internships. We have some tremendous interns within CED, and we intend to rely on their help. This is a picture of Jordan Burt McGregor, who you'll recall assembled and delivered close to 1,000 small business supply bags to our businesses over the last year. So they've been tremendous in terms of building out our team. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about the equitable development framework. Next slide. I know this is hard to see, but we did some work in terms of synthesizing and summarizing the ECI plan so that when we have proposals that may come through the housing solicitation and the other HRA programmatic areas, that we have a framework to review it against. If you'll go on to the next slide, just to talk a little bit about what the objectives were. This was a recommended action within the Economic Competitiveness and Inclusion Plan itself, was to create a framework for the county, but this is specific to community and economic development. This is specific to how we intend to kind of steer questions for those that are participating on review committees for the proposals we may receive over the programmatic areas. So it's intended to be a framework in terms of guiding questions that we may ask proposers, but it's not a policy and it's not a scoring rubric. Those entities that reviewed the equitable development framework included policy and planning staff, public works, multimodal planning, property management, our racial health and equity administrators, and we also sought feedback from the Alliance for Metropolitan Stability because they lead the equitable scorecard. And so they're able to provide some suggestions and feedback as well. Again, this is a tool that we intend to submit to those participating on review committees to ensure that we're all working from the same ECI lens when we review a proposal. And at the conclusion of this, I will send the document out so you can take a look at it as well. Next slide. All right, there's a link to the ECI tracker. Again, there's a better link associated with it. And so I'll make sure that the board receives that at the conclusion of this. But with that, board chair and commissioners will open it up for questions and discussion.
Krista?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say huge congratulations on all of this work and to put our economic inclusion plan into action and more detail is really remarkable. I also just want to pause and recognize how quickly our economic development team has been built out over the last 2 years, and the breadth and depth of talent that was demonstrated today that really has set us up in a really good place. And just wanted to applaud your entire team. Everyone who presented today is truly remarkable and has us in the right direction. So thank you very much. This is really exciting stuff.
Mary Jo?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to echo that gratitude and thanks, and just the amazement at how fast that this team has built out and worked on these issues. I know when I first got to the county board 10 years ago now, oh my goodness, we said, oh, what are we doing about housing? And they said, well, cities do zoning, and we're looking, we know it's important. We can do a few things, but this is really exciting what you're doing. And I'm just proud of our county and proud of you all for doing that. I do have a question on the surface parking because it was an intriguing workshop when you did it. And ever since you did it, I'm paying a lot more attention to all the parking lots in the area. And I've noticed that so many of them are getting built up. Like all of the stores are putting restaurants in their parking lots. So just curious if you comment, I know that's not just what we're talking about, but it was land that was not being used. And clearly they didn't need that land for all the cars that were there. But if you want to just comment, like Rosedale, Harmer, all out in our area, there's not a shopping center now that I can see that isn't putting in other things in their parking lots. Is that part of this? I don't think we have anything to do with it, but is that part of the surface parking, or is there's another function to that surface parking issue as well, isn't there?
Martha, do you want to take this one? Martha and our intern have been working on this, but I think it's twofold in terms of identifying underutilized surface parking so that I think you'd be surprised. I think our go-to is to think about retail centers and the space around it, but I think you'd be surprised as to what we're finding. But Martha, go ahead.
Sure. It's just commissioners, thanks for the question. It's an opportunity to kind of understand those land use patterns over time. And I think it brings some analysis. It's a kind of a resource that we can provide to communities. And then it really dovetails well into that corridor planning and corridor development grants so that if communities are, as part of implementing their comp plans and revisiting their zoning codes, if they want to revisit their parking standards, potentially they can have some, that can be an area of alignment, especially in transit corridors, obviously. So we're just trying to bring some analysis to the picture, but what you're citing is obviously the market. The market plays a huge role, and but in some cases, some of those sites have a lot of underutilized parking that it really is never truly full. And just from a climate change standpoint, and just opportunity for infill development, it's something that I think is part of that kind of holistic picture.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's just been fascinating to watch, and I understand it's multifaceted, so I'll keep watching. I'll keep watching it. Thank you.
Jim?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. All good. Ditto to everything that's been said. Amazing amount of work, short period of time. You guys have just done a great job. Carrie, I brought this up before, but I wanted to just touch base on. I think the ECI tracker is a great tool, and it's important, especially because our cities have asked for it. But it really is a report out about what we're doing, and not really in the evaluation of are we hitting our targets and our marks. And I know there's some dashboards built into this, but this is a lot in a short period of time and a lot of money. We're bringing in the ARPA money, we've added in the HRA levy, the amount of work that's gone in the Economic Development Inclusion Plan, and connecting this all back to it. And it's all very hopeful stuff that we can actually start moving the needle in a real way in our community. But I think it's important that we have an evaluation component connected to it, so that we can really make sure we can adjust and be flexible. You have your flexible account, because that's one of the biggest things. But really trying to get that, we can't always predict human nature. We can't always predict who's going to be our best partners in this. And we're going to have to be nimble and flexible before we get too much money out the door if things aren't going the way we hope they go. And you really need an evaluation component to this. So, I bring it up again. I trust you guys. You guys are great folks over there. I know you're aware of this, and it's a big part of it. Ryan's listening here, Joanna's listening. But I do think this is a really good opportunity for us to strengthen. You've heard me. I don't want to be a broken record on this, but our performance measures in our budget process have never been satisfying to me from the day we started with the 2-year budget process. And that's evolved over years. It's intended to be part of that, kind of evaluation piece, so that we use it in our budgeting tool. And I think it needs to continue to evolve for it to be really useful to all of us, not just the board as we're making decisions, but department heads, the county manager. So I think this is a huge opportunity for us to really take a hard look about how does the evaluation component fit into this, and what does it mean for us as far as hitting targets, expectations, all the things we're hoping to do, so that in 5 years from now, we're there, right? We demonstrate that ECI tracker can report out. We've moved the needle, and this is how we did it. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add one quick comment to that, Commissioner McDonough, Mr. Chair, I would just, tomorrow at 10:05, from 10:05 to 10:35, there will be a conversation at the executive team titled ARPA Evaluation Structure, with 4 people presenting a PowerPoint of what that structure may look like. So it is brewing and coming back your way through the process. I can't tell you what it says yet, because I haven't gotten to see the presentation yet.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Jim. Tony?
Thank you. That's exciting to hear. And, as we hear so often from our planning director, it's important to know not just what we're doing, how much it costs, but who's better off. So I'm excited to see the reporting tracker, as well as the equitable development framework objectives, which I think are important, not just for reviewing through the project committee review process, but also for information out in the community. It could be that this is a document that goes to developers in general that helps to focus our values and our goals, but that also helps them as they're considering working with us in the future or simply considering aligning with our vision and mission and goals for the county. This is great work that you all have doing. You've heard that you all are doing. You've heard the accolades, and I'll simply say ditto. Thank you, and continue to share all of this with our community.
Thank you. Victoria?
Thank you. Well, I am also, kudos to every member, to the whole team, but to every individual member of the team, because it's very clear as we listen to people making presentations or answering questions or going out into the community to talk about this, that there is a commitment there that really is driving this team effort. And I just am so proud of the work that they are doing and the commitment that they have, and to the commitment to evaluation. I mean, the ECGI tracking tool, that's about evaluation. You have to track it. You have to figure out where you've made progress, where you haven't, what can you change. And I also think it speaks to how they quickly developed one of the best reporting mechanisms for the CARES funding, and building upon that, because that was something that had to be done so quickly. But this is more longer term, because it's not just federal funds, it's also the HRA funds. I mean, there's so many different aspects of this, and really the thought that went into it and continues to go into it, because this is the beginning. And that's really what it comes down to. This is the beginning. And there's always going to be little hiccups here and there, but I really am confident in this team that we have. And, the other day I was trying to think of, okay, what does this remind me of when you look at all the different funding mechanisms and the application process and everything? And I thought, if any of you have had to go through the FAFSA program when your kids are going to college and they're looking for financial assistance, I remember when I was of the age looking at that, I mean, you finally just gave up because you couldn't figure it out. And then they came up with this one tool. You put your information in, and then it goes to wherever it needs to go, and they figure out what you're eligible for. And to me, that's what this reminds me of. And what a relief this must be to the communities, to the developers, to anyone that's trying to access these funds, the individual homeowners or renters trying to find something. This was quite the undertaking. And I'm sure that it's not perfect. I'm sorry, but there's very little in life that is. But the amount of work and the compliments that you've received from this board and from community members is well deserved. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, great work by the staff, great discussion by the board. Carrie, I'll give you the last word. Maybe you could tell us when you're going to come back to us with more input, more, status of where everything's at.
Well, I appreciate that, Chair. And I do want to say, in terms of the ECI tracker, our cadence in terms of updates will be twice a year. So I'm thinking maybe there's maybe not in terms of a full blown presentation in a workshop, but some sort of cadence that we can get on with the board. And I'll look to the county manager for guidance on that, so that the board is in full awareness in terms of program rollout as these programs are developed. One piece that I just want to add is my gratitude toward all of the staff that have played a role in this mega housing solicitation. We got the final guidance from the Treasury. We sifted through that. We worked with our county attorney staff. We worked with compliance. We're still working through that. And it's a lot of work. And it's a lot of work for our housing team. And Max Holdhusen has done a great job in terms of kind of driving the cadence. And I just want to give my gratitude to everybody involved in communications, there's going to be a lot in terms of social media and social media boosts that in ways that we haven't really done solicitations before to ensure a wide range of developers have access to this information. And so I just really want to make sure that, you know, everyone's aware of the work that's gone into this. And, you know, I think in terms of kind of navigating the next 2 to 3 to 5 years, there's no doubt that our programs are going to evolve and change and amplify and accelerate, or maybe drop off as we understand where the critical needs are. And the critical needs may change as well. And so we do hope to have aggressive evaluation in all of our program delivery and program outcomes. And that I think our city partners are going to hold us accountable to that too. So just want to thank you again for the support and endorsement of this board. This is a heavy lift. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and it takes a lot of support to be able to keep the, you know, keep everyone driving forward. And so I really appreciate those kind words today.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, we're adjourned.